Billy the Kid, the Old West's most famous outlaw, wasn't one. His real name wasn't Billy Bonney. His Lincoln County war fight wasn't about cattle competition. He didn't murder 21 men. He wasn't shot dead by accident. Here's his real history in a nutshell.
The shell is the Santa Fe Ring. Crooked officials covering New Mexico territory in the 1870s. The nuts were the ring's bosses, Thomas Benton Catron and Stephen Benton Elkins, using judges, troops, and murderers while stealing Mexicans' land grants. Elkins, in Washington, D.C. politics, got him federal protection. Sure, the people fought back, but the ring won, then hid in its shell. One kid blasted that shell to smithereens and dragged those nuts into the light. He was born in New York City as Henry McCarty on November 23, 1859, with no known daddy, an Irish mom, Catherine, and an older brother. Catherine headed west, ending up in New Mexico territory in 1873 and marrying a William Henry Harrison Antrim, hankering to mine in Silver City. You can't call Henry lucky. Catherine died of TB the next year, and Antrim kicked him out. But Henry was smart. In Silver City, he picked up fancy handwriting and fluent Spanish at Chihuahua Hill. He also picked up robbing. Stealing from a Chinese laundry at 15, he got jail for a home till he wiggled out its chimney and hightailed to Bonita, Arizona. In Arizona, Henry fattened his cook wages by stealing horses and tack from local Fort Grant till being caught. Seems hooskows and escapes were becoming a habit. He exited the fort's guardhouse through a roof vent. Back in Bonita, on August 17, 1877, things got worse. Ornery blacksmith, Windy Cahill, was flattening him when Henry showed off his new talent, shooting. Cahill's coroner's jury voted to hang Henry Antrim, except he'd vamoosed back to New Mexico. But he left Henry Antrim behind. "Call me Billy Bonney," he told Hell's future resident. Ring thug Jesse Evans when joining his gang. Jesse was fixing to make it hot for Englishmen, John Tunstall, starting a store, bank, and ranches in Lincoln County. Except boss Catron had identical plans. Catron's Lincoln store, called The House run by sub-bosses, sold his rustled beef to Fort Stanton and the Mescalero Reservation. Jesse commenced to rustle Tunstall's stock while teenaged Billy lollygagged with locals. They said Tunstall needed ranch hands. Billy took the job. Tunstall was giving his men Homestead Act ranches along main rivers to control grazing land to the Pecos, where John Chisholm, his pal, was cattle king. Billy, called Kid by the men, was a charmer, teasing, dancing, and singing at shindigs. Keeping dust off his saddle, Billy also headed 100 miles to Fort Sumner, founded in 1870 by Lucien Bonaparte Maxwell from the original fort, after the ring cheated him and his wife out of their 2-million-acre Maxwell land grant. In Fort Sumner, Billy met dead Lucien's young daughter, Paulita. It would end up love and fatal. He also met newcomer Pat Garrett gambling in the saloon. That would be fatal too. Garrett had already killed one kid, named Joe Briscoe, on the Buffalo Range. Jesse failed to make Tunstall budge, so Catron added Lincoln County Sheriff William Brady. Catron liked highfalutin court cases for killing. He commenced with Lincoln lawyer Alexander McSween, who'd worked for The House. McSween had collected life insurance money from a dead sub-boss, but held up paying local heirs while seeking others. So Catron arrested him as an embezzler. Ringite judge Warren Bristol added Tunstall by lying that he was McSween's partner.
Bristol had Brady inventory, both men's property, for the money. Why? To incite violence, so Brady could kill them in self-defense. But Tunstall just said,
"The life of one man is worth more than all I own."
For Rough Billy, this was like hearing Amazing Grace. He was saved. But Brady wasn't. Brady's deadline was April's grand jury, where McSween would be cleared for sure. So, on February 18, 1878, Brady sent a big posse, with Jesse Evans and his boys added, to attack Tunstall and his men, herding horses from his ranch back to Lincoln. Billy was there. He heard the killing shots. Tunstall was dead. Even his horse was shot. Happy days were over. Tunstall's men called themselves Regulators to arrest his murderers, since Brady obviously wouldn't, being one. By March 6th, the Regulators got Possum and Frank Baker and Buck Morton and killed both, attempting escape. If Billy notched his gun, there were now 3, including Windy Cahill. Ringite Governor S.B. Axtell was called in. He wrote a proclamation outlawing the Regulators. Alexander McSween was next. Brady knew he'd come to Lincoln from his hideout on April 1, 1878, for his grand jury trial. The Regulators knew it too, so they hid behind the adobe wall gate in Tunstall's store's corral and ambushed Brady and his deputies heading east to give McSween his ticket to heaven. Brady and Deputy George Hinman died, making 5 notches total for Billy. On April 4th, still feeling deputized, the Regulators tried to arrest trigger-happy murder possum Buckshot Roberts at Blazer's Mill. Charlie Bowdry killed him in self-defense, while Roberts finished off Regulator leader Dick Brewer and wounded George Coe and John Middleton. Billy didn't shoot, but was indicted with the others, so Buckshot counts as Notch 6. All this meant war, the Lincoln County War. Catron brought in his rustler ranchers from the Pecos, who stole from Chisholm's 80,000 head. They murdered new Regulator head, Frank McNabb. Then they attacked Lincoln. Regulators killed some, and new Sheriff John Copeland locked up the rest in Fort Stanton. But Ring Tool Commander N.A.M. Dudley released them. Governor Axtell then fired Copeland by proclamation and made Ringite George Pepin sheriff. McSween hadn't been idle. He'd told the British ambassador that Tunstall was murdered by U.S. officials. That triggered a presidential investigation. So Billy caught on that words were better than bullets. On June 8, 1878, he gave his deposition about Tunstall's murder to the investigator, Frank Warner Angel. Catron kept going. As U.S. attorney, he wrote Federal Indictment 411 to hang the Regulators for the Buckshot Roberts killing. Sheriff Pepin then earned his spot in hell. On July 3, 1878, to punish Mexican San Patricio for hiding McSween, he used John Kinney's gang for a massacre. On July 13th, furious Billy sent his Regulator manifesto to Catron's brother-in-law, promising consequences. On July 14, 1878, Alexander McSween led 60 men to Lincoln. Some were Regulators, including Billy. Most were Mexicans from San Patricio and Picacho. It was an Hispanic uprising. It was also the 6-day Lincoln County War battle, from July 14th through 19th. McSween's men hunkered down in houses through Lincoln. Confident McSween kept his wife Susan, her sister with children, and his law intern Harvey Morris in their big house. McSween knew the Posse Comitatus Act was just passed, saying troops couldn't fight civilians. But when Seven Rivers Boys and John Kinney's gang rode in to be Pepin's posse, McSween did let Billy, with other men, into his house. Soon, lively Billy had everyone stuck there, laughing. But Catron was pressuring Commander Dudley over Fort Stanton's telegraph. On June 16th, Dudley's cavalrymen, sent for fact-finding, got bucked off after a wild shot from the house. Dudley accused McSween of attempted murder. On day 5, low-down Lincolnite Saturnino Baca sprang the trap. He got a prearranged letter to Dudley saying McSween threatened his wife and children. The Posse Comitatus Act allowed protecting women and children. On day 6, July 19, 1878, Dudley marched on Lincoln with black cavalry, white infantry and officers, a cannon, and a Gatling gun. McSween's men hightailed it out of town. Dudley left guards at McSween's house and gave Pepin guards. Pepin's men set fire to McSween's house, freeing only women and children. At 9 p.m., the men ran out into shooting. Billy saw 3 white soldiers fire a volley at them, likely murdering Harvey Morris. Billy and others escaped. McSween was murdered, along with accidentally shot Possumin serving his fake warrant. The Lincoln County War was lost. Billy got money gambling and rustling from Ringites. On October 24, 1878, in Tascosa, Texas, he sold a Henry Hoyt dead Sheriff Brady's stolen horse with a legal-sounding bill of sale. Though investigator Angel covered up the ring, on October 1, 1878, President Rutherford B. Hayes replaced Governor S.B. Axtell with past Civil War General Lew Wallace. People felt hope. But Wallace, figuring his own skin came first, figured he'd avoid the ring by hanging Regulators as outlaws. Billy was number 14 on the ring's list. Wallace also made an amnesty proclamation, pardoning all the war's fighters who weren't indicted. Susan McSween was a firebrand. She hired attorney Houston Chapman to get Dudley for murder and arson. So the Ring murdered Chapman on Lincoln Street on February 18, 1879. Billy saw, being at a peace meeting with the killers, James Dolan, Jesse Evans, Billy Campbell.
Another Lincoln murder looked bad for Wallace, so he offered a $1,000 reward for outlaw Billy.
Instead, Wallace got a March 13, 1879 letter from Billy offering to testify against Chapman's murderers for a pardon for the Brady, Hindman, and Roberts killings. Wallace met with Billy. The deal was sealed. Billy planned sham jailing in the Lincoln house of his friend Juan Patron. Billy testified at the grand jury and got all indicted. Wallace did nothing. The Ring did something. In that court, it changed Billy's venue from Lincoln to Doña Ana County to ensure hanging for his indictments. Meanwhile, Susan McSween hired attorney Ira Leonard. Talk about guts. Chapman was his office mate. Already at the pearly gates were Tunstall, Brewer, McNabb, McSween, and Morris. On April 25, 1879, the Ring barely missed Leonard, and it gave Billy a new name, Outlaw Billy the Kid. Dudley's court of inquiry for possible court-martial was in Fort Stanton. Billy testified that he saw 3 white troops volley, which meant under Dudley's orders, which meant that Dudley was guilty.
It didn't matter. The court was Ring-controlled. Dudley was let off.
With no pardon, Billy walked out of Patron's, returning to his gambling circuit and homelessness. Billy's fame caught up with him on January 3, 1880, when Texan bounty hunter Joe Grant tried to shoot him in Fort Sumner's Hargrove Saloon. Joe failed. Billy's bullet didn't. That made notch 7. Catron had plans for Billy. Using boss Elkins's Washington clout, in September of 1880, Catron brought in Secret Service operative Azariah Wild and faked Billy as a counterfeiter. Picked for Billy's killer was Pat Garrett. Wild helped to make Garrett the Lincoln County Sheriff and a deputy U.S. Marshal, and paid for Texan posses, because New Mexicans took Billy's side. But Ira Leonard, still Billy's lawyer, spoiled the plot by making a pardon deal with Wild for Billy's testifying against counterfeiters. But brainy Billy, robbed the stagecoach with Wild's reports, saw he'd be arrested and backed out. Meanwhile, Sheriff Garrett riled up new White Oak settlers about outlaw Billy the Kid, so they ambushed Billy and friends on November 22, 1880, at Coyote Spring. Right after, they ambushed again when Billy was at Whiskey Jim Greathouse's ranch. A Jim Carlisle went in calling for surrender, but got spooked by a shot outside and jumped out a window, getting plugged by his side. So they blamed Billy. On December 12, 1880, Billy wrote to Governor Wallace seeking sympathy and his pardon for these attacks. Instead, Wallace put a $500 reward for Billy the Kid in the Las Vegas Gazette. On December 19th, Garrett ambushed Billy and his friends, riding into Fort Sumner. The bullet meant for Billy got Tom O'Folliard, his sidekick. Billy finally got the traveling urge, but stopped in a blizzard with his friends at a Stinking Springs line cabin. On December 22, 1880, Garrett, with posse, ambushed again, thinking he'd finally killed Billy, but got Charlie Bowdry wearing Billy's sombrero. Garrett then just arrested the bunch. That same day, the Ring had made outlaw Billy the Kid famous across America in a New York Sun article, and Lew Wallace published his second Billy the Kid reward notice. Garrett took his captives to the Santa Fe jail. The Ring kept Billy there from December 27, 1880 to March 28, 1881, because they awaited finishing of the rescue-proof railroad to Mesilla. Billy wrote 4 pardon plea letters to Wallace, close by at the Palace of the Governors. Wallace ignored them. Billy was taken to Mesilla for hanging trials. Loyal attorney Ira Leonard came with him. The judge was Ringite Warren Bristol. Leonard got Catron's indictment 411 for the Buckshot Roberts killing thrown out, because it wasn't really federal, just territorial, being on private property. So the Ring tried to kill Leonard again. He quit. Billy got court-appointed attorney A.J. Fountain, who fought like a butterfly for the Sheriff Brady killing trial. Billy got first degree, with hanging on May 13, 1881. Billy arrived in Lincoln on April 21, 1881, to Sheriff Pat Garrett's custody. Billy was held in the second floor of the house, which Catron had sold for a courthouse jail. The deputized guards were James Bell and Lincoln County war murderer Bob Ollinger. Billy escaped a week later with Garrett out of town and with help from the building's caretaker, his old friend Gottfried Gauss, who left a pistol in the outhouse and gave him a miner's pick to break the leg chains. When Deputy Bell ran for help, Billy shot him. When Ollinger ran back to the building, Billy added to his weight with his own shotgun's lead. Billy rode away on a pony saddled up by Gauss. Townspeople just watched, figuring they'd finally won something. Billy's final tally was 9 men. Old Mexico was logical for bilingual, 21-year-old Billy, but he headed northeast to Fort Sumner and Paulita. By July 14, 1881, Pat Garrett tracked him, bringing deputies John William Poe and Kip McKinney. An ambush was planned in the Maxwell's mansion, with Paulita's brother Peter as decoy. Garrett hid in Peter's dark bedroom. An unknown accomplice sent Billy there. Just before moonlit midnight, Billy walked from Sabal and Celsa Gutierrez's house, with their knife to cut a steak from beef hung on the north porch. First, he went into Maxwell's bedroom. Right off, Garrett shot him dead. Townspeople had Billy's wake in their carpenter's shop. The next day, Billy's Hispanic coroner's jury identified him, and, taking no chances, with their president being ringite postmaster Milner Rudolph, called it justifiable homicide with Garrett deserving a reward.
Billy was buried in the Maxwell Cemetery beside Charlie Baudry and Tom O'Folliard. He'd already gotten the last laugh on his outlaw fame in a letter to Lew Wallace. Billy said,
"The gentleman must have drawn very heavily on his imagination.